recording. There's my first rookie move.
Yay.
Yay.
Yay, we're recording.
All right, so I'm going to give a quick update on our Student Wellness and Equity Coordinator hiring process. I'm going to talk about the lower elementary that has returned in person and some updates there. I'm going to remind everyone about the elementary opt-in deadline that's coming up at the end of this week. I will report on what we know about staff vaccinations, and I'll update folks on our quarantine protocols for people who engage in particular kinds of activities, and briefly share the little bit I know about MCA testing, but you'll be getting more information about that in bulletins. And then we'll talk about adolescent survey data in response to our questions about returning to in-person learning or distance learning. So that's...
And if anyone in the audience has a question, would you please put it in the Q&A? I'm going to check the chat, but Q&A is the better place for it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Holly. So the Student Wellness and Equity Coordinator position has been posted widely and will remain open for applications until the 30th of March. The committee is meeting weekly. It's comprised of students, caregivers, and staff, both teaching staff and administration. It's a primarily, it's a majority BIPOC group. And we are planning to start interviews the first week of April. And so the amazing applications are, I've been floored by the level of talent and experience our applicants have, and it's a pretty exciting process to be engaged in. I can't wait to meet people on Zoom and hear them talk about their accomplishments in person. It's pretty exciting.
That's great.
Yeah. And so let's move on to number 2. Lower elementary is back in school. Yeah, I'd say about 70% of our students are in person, and the remaining are in virtual learning. It is a joy. I have just found so much happiness. I mean, Jean and I, the elementary director, and I just are beaming with happiness all the time when we go into the classrooms. The children, I was worried that there would be anxiety, and both the adults and the children seem as if they just have like fish in water. They're so back at work and just thrilled to be together, and I just couldn't be more pleased. It's as if they never left, so it's fantastic.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's worth coming to take a peek if you ever feel the courage to do so. But it's a beautiful thing. And one of the important things that we're doing that I'm pretty proud of and excited about is we're doing safety snapshots and classroom audits, where we gather data around how well students are maintaining the masking protocols and maintaining physical distance of 3 feet between one another. And at least 4 times a day, one of the classroom adults or a special ed adult or a social worker or me or one of the elementary administration does a snapshot in every single open classroom. And so we have a ton of information, and we count. It's great. Derek Damron, who's the elementary, one of the elementary administrators, has put a QR code outside every classroom. So you literally just hold your phone up to it, you open up the form, it takes 3 minutes, you fill in how many students aren't wearing masks, how many students are wearing masks incorrectly, how many students are not maintaining distance, It all magically feeds into a, a special data place that aggregates all the data. And so we can see classroom by classroom and as a whole, the, how our students are doing. And then every Friday, the adults in the classrooms fill out a qualitative survey that we're calling a classroom audit that shares their experience of being in the classroom that week. And then we, look at the information together. So I'm going to share with you all some of the information from this past couple of weeks. We are, our quantitative data is that 96% of the students are in compliance with the mask mandate. So when you think about the fact that our children who are now in the building are 6, 7, and 8 years old, maybe not some 9-year-olds, that's pretty remarkable. I've been, yeah, and even the ones that struggled in the beginning a little bit are getting better and better. And also, if any of the folks here who are attending were able to watch the reminder videos that some of our guides made, they were hilarious and really informative. And so the students are doing a beautiful job of, oh, hey, I noticed that your mask slipped down from your nose, and being able to give gentle reminders to each other and then not take it personally. So it's a really wonderful thing to see. On the other hand, as many of you know who have small children in your lives, the distancing is only at about 94% compliance, because they're like little magnets with each other, quite honestly. It's more of a constant reminder. You'll notice the children looking at a book together and kind of inching closer together. And that seems much more unnatural to their psyches to stay apart from one another. So, that's a place where we have more room for improvement. And it gets really tricky when they're playing outside too, because they just want to be together so much.
That's still very good for littles.
Yeah, I'm pretty impressed with the students. And then our classroom audits, what the guides do is they rank from 1, which is terrible, to 5, which is perfect, how they think things are going. And so I went through all that data today, and the masking are almost all 4s and 5s. Basically, and all the comments where it's going great. I'm surprised students are handling this really well. Not surprisingly, the distancing were more 3s and 4s, because as I described, it's a really difficult thing to enforce with young children. And then we also ask how they feel their in-person student engagement is going and how their virtual learner student engagement is going. And so we got mostly 4s for the in-person engagement. As I said, the students are really just in love with doing their work back together. And then more 3s and 4s for the virtual learners. I think a lot of people made the virtual learning choice for really great reasons, and we are trying very hard to keep that interesting and exciting and to maintain that connection. But I think we all realize that most young children are wishing to be together. So we don't want to in any way neglect our virtual learners, but it takes a little extra effort to keep the students connected and engaged on the screen. So those are, do we have any questions in regards to elementary?
Nothing yet.
Okay, great. Another update I want to share about elementary is that we had our first, since we've been back in person, classroom go home because of a positive COVID case. And so everybody, we found out right as arrival was happening. The students, we quickly crafted pulled out our explanation for students, which was very reassuring to students that, your families are going to come pick you up and you're going to go home today. This is something that happens a lot in the pandemic at schools. We recognize that, it's kind of hard to have your routine interrupted, and it's, if you feel anxious, here you can talk to these adults, and we always share the names of so they know our social workers, and they know they can talk to their guides. And the children all took it, from our end, took it really well. They went out immediately and got to have recess all the time until their families came. All the parents and caregivers who we contacted understood and appreciated our quick, pace of making a decision and getting everyone safe. And I feel great that this is only our 5th positive case in the whole entire year, and that we had, I think our systems worked really, really well. So that was great. And then we had subsequently a second person from that group test positive. We have no way of knowing whether it's a coincidence or whether it was, something that happened by the exposure between the two people. But then we just extended the quarantine for a few more days to correspond to the last exposure with that person. And so if anyone's curious, I worked with our nurse and our agency to kind of make sure we fully understood the CDC and MDH guidelines, which are you have to quarantine for 7 days if you have a direct contact. If you have a negative COVID test 5 days after your exposure. If you don't go get a COVID test, then you have to quarantine for a full 14 days and have no symptoms. So there are different levels of quarantine expectation in order to be able to return to in-person learning. And then we were really lucky because we've done a pretty good job of maintaining classrooms, staying in there, not intermingling. So we didn't have any concerns about anything spreading from classroom to classroom. And we also contact traced and made sure that any adults, who were in any way part of that, we let them know, even if they weren't part of the classroom community. So again, it's unfortunate when things like that happen, but I think we had a pretty good system going, and the whole team just rallied together.
That's good. Teamwork.
Yeah. There's one Q&A in there.
There is one. It says, thank you for supporting instead of embarrassing or shaming students with positive tests. I don't have a lower EL student, so I'm sorry for asking something that everyone else may already understand. But is Great River testing students at the school? And if so, how often and which type of test? Thank you.
Such a good question. And we have on-site testing for teachers and staff. And that runs every 2 weeks, and it's sponsored by the state. We do not have any means for for student testing. Some of the rural schools are getting support from the state to do on-site testing for students, but urban schools like ours that have easily accessible, large testing facilities that people can get to pretty easily are not given those resources. And it's also really easy to, and I think we put this information in the bulletin, to get an at-home test sent to you, and the turnaround is at the speed of light. And so those are both the options that we encourage people to take advantage of. And we can't, because of privacy, and we can't force people to get tested, even our own staff, we have to just encourage. So good question though. And it probably is confusing if you're hearing about the rural schools that are getting those resources because they don't have access to big testing facilities. So now I'm going to switch over to just a little review. Of any of you who listen to the news and all of that, you'll know that cases in Minnesota are slightly rising. And so we're keeping an eye on that and listening to Dr. Osterholm's podcasts and trying to stay up to speed on the latest information, and particularly, having a little twinge of worry about the variants, more than one. And so it's definitely information that we're paying attention to.
Wendy, before you go further, there's a question that says, how did Great River find out that the student was positive? Was it a phone call to school from parents or from public health?
It was from the person.
The student?
Yes, it was not. It was reported that in the way that we wish it would be, that people are very open, and then we always ask for contact tracing. Do you want us to keep your name private? And if so, can you share anyone who you are in contact with, or with, or we keep that information very close, and we do that in a private kind of way. So.
Thank you.
Yes. I want to report that well over half, close to 60% of our staff has reported that they are in the vaccination process, either fully vaccinated or on the way. We suspect that that number is quite a bit higher based on the information we're getting from the state, but we, again, cannot and do not require people to tell us. So this is just folks who have chosen to report this information. And then, although I can see kind of this like wave of relief running through everybody who's working on site as the vaccinations kind of roll through, it's being somebody who has had the opportunity to do that, I know that it just gave me such a wave of relief, having worked on site with children all year long. So I want to also now pivot to reminding folks that if you are an elementary family, you have a deadline coming up this Friday to opt in to in-person learning if you're currently in virtual learning. And so I want you to not let that deadline go by if you're considering a change, and feel free to reach out to me, Jean, your students' guides, if you have further questions and want more information before you make that decision. Because your next opt-in date will not be till May. And I was asked recently why we, this may not be in the questions, but maybe something people wonder about why we're so kind of rigid, for lack of a better word, about these opt-in dates, and the fact that we're only letting students change models 3 times throughout the spring. And the reason for that is that there's such an intensity of like norm setting when the new students come in, and it kind of takes a whole week really to get everyone on the same page and to rebuild the sense of in-person community. And so if students were coming and going, it would be, I think, destabilizing, and it would be hard to maintain that the beautiful work ethic that we're seeing, and the students in compliance with our protocols. So that's the reason for our kind of 3 times, and that's it. Okay, let's see. I want to go back to Holly. Help me out. I'm trying to find my
Your slideshow
here. No, my list. Here we go.
List.
So I also wanted to update folks. We've tweaked, again, working with Rosa, our nurse, we've tweaked our quarantine protocols. Originally, we were going strictly by what the CDC said, which was that if you travel across state lines, you need to quarantine. And it felt it felt strange to us that if you wear your mask, safely drive in your car, visit your grandma who's fully vaccinated, who happens to live over the line in Wisconsin, and you drive home again, that you have to quarantine. But if you go to, a biker rally in Duluth and, party with a bunch of maskless people, then you don't have to quarantine. And so, I mean, those are just extreme examples, but it just felt a little, it felt strange. So we worked with Rosa to come up with some language that is more clear, that it's about the behavior. So if your student engages in an activity, which could include travel or weddings or sports events that put your child in proximity to lots of people who aren't practicing, to people who aren't practicing the safety protocols, then we ask that you quarantine for a week until you get a negative COVID test 5 days after that experience.
And that's still true then if you don't want to get tested, that it's 14 days?
Correct, yes. Mm-hmm. So we thought that was more, we thought that was just more encompassing and more in spirit of keeping one another safe as a community. So that I wanted people to know about, especially this is probably relevant to a lot of people for spring break. And we were also worried that people would do safe travel over spring break because you can safely travel. It's possible. I've done it. And then we would have staff and students in and out, and that it would just, for really no reason that they were put in any unsafe situation. So this felt better to us. And then my little tidbit of an update about MCA testing is that the state is requiring us to host testing, which is grades, I think is it, Holly, help me out, as a Minnesota 3 and up?
3, 5, and up.
Okay. All right.
I'm not positive.
So
I do think third graders are the youngest.
Yes, and we have to do it in person. There's not a virtual way of doing it. And so we are hosting that for families, but we're asking families to either opt in or opt out. And so families have an opt out. And I think there's a robust Facebook discussion about it. If I'm aware, I think I've seen that. We are finding that many of our families are just choosing to opt out this year for a variety of reasons. But we are offering it.
Is there a form for that?
There is. If you don't know how to access it, go ahead and send an email to office@greatriverschool.org. But it's also been in our family bulletin every week. It will be coming to you on Thursday as well. So now, if there aren't any questions, Holly, about any of that elementary, and
we have nothing yet.
Okay. I am going to pivot to pull up a little slideshow and talk a bit about adolescent.
Okay. It looks good.
All right. Let me do there we go. All right, so we recently surveyed our adolescent students, our adolescent caregivers, and our adolescent faculty. And we've been able to crunch the data, and it is really leads us to clear as mud outcomes. So I'll share some of it. We tried to be very thoughtful about how we're going to make decisions, in particular around bringing adolescent students in person, because the epidemiology is a different set of risk factors than for younger children. And the older students are not all by any means, but as a group taking to distance learning a little bit better than the younger students. So those are two important factors. As always, we want to, center the needs of our community members who aren't historically represented. And so we look at who benefits from different kinds of choices and what people are saying about their needs. So that's our process. And then I think Sam said some of this last week, but I just want to reiterate it because these are the conversations I've been having with students and community meeting with students, is we want to make sure we're solving for the correct problem. Like, if the problem for our younger students was both a sense of disengagement by learning on a screen, and also some pretty significant, we were seeing like learning loss. We were seeing them not make academic progress because, a 6-year-old can't learn on Zoom to read how to read if they don't know how to read. It's just, maybe they can, but it doesn't go very well. Whereas our older students most of them, the majority of them are learning and making progress academically. And what we're hearing from them and from their families is that they're lonely and they're anxious and they want to be around other people. They miss their sense of community and their friendships and their activities. So we want to make sure we're looking at what should we be putting our energy toward to make the spring a better experience for these students without upending things that are going reasonably well. And so what we heard from students is that the majority of them, over 50%, think distance learning is the best model for them. And only about 30% really think that in-person learning is the right choice for them. So that's pretty compelling. And so that's an interesting piece of data. And then they also let us know that what their top priorities, what they'd like to see us put our energy toward as educators to make their school experience great or better, is being able to meet up, not to have classes in person, not to be in the building all day long, but to have meetups for, having a science class, have an in-person, field trip kind of activity, or have options for social meetups. And so almost 25% of the students did want opportunities for direct instruction on campus. And so these are all important pieces of information for us. I have a tiny data set. I happen to be with a team of guest co-teachers teaching 39 students in grade 10 health this semester. And so I sent them a survey and asked, would you ever come on site to do like an outdoor or an indoor health class in person? And about half, again, it's very interesting, about half of the students said sometimes they would consider that. And many of them said they would only do that if it were an outside opportunity. And so I have my own little kind of data collection going.
And it matches with this.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And so we also asked the students what is driving their choice. And a lot of the students said we're in a pandemic. Really, like, honestly, that's what they said. Some of the students who asked about more in-person opportunities talked about needing to be out of the house and feeling like their mental health is being impacted. And a lot of the students who said they wanted social connections. The bulk of the students who responded and chose, one of these factors, chose that they need social connections. So, and then there was a subset that said they or a family member is medically vulnerable and they don't want to put anyone in their family at risk. So I think particularly because these older students are fully aware of, that unless they're in a study group, vaccines aren't available to them. And so they're not going to have the same kind of mitigation factors as the adults who are getting vaccinated, hopefully at an even faster pace than ever. So, so when you look at how families answered, I mean, you have to laugh. Families more want in-person learning for their students. So whether that's, either a lot of families worrying about their students' anxiety and social needs, and or maybe needing to get their work done. Who knows? But it's definitely a very different mix when you look at family versus student answers. And then if you look at the comparison of all families and caregivers and BIPOC caregivers and free and reduced lunch folks, you can see the little differences in how folks answered. So when you look at this, Holly, what do you see?
Well, I was looking at how the people who disagree, distance learning is the best model for my student right now. It seems like a higher number disagree. Mm-hmm. But then I was looking at the all parent, not separating people out, and that's pretty close between agree and disagree. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, the free and reduced lunch students, family answers, the parents are asking for help, it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's just in a less optimistic moment, you might think no matter what we decide to do, we're going to upset 50% of our families. So
yeah, it's been a tough year.
Yes, and we're headed to the finish line. And then we flipped the question and asked, in-person learning is the best model for my student right now. Mm-hmm. And again, it's very similar.
And yet, interestingly, different.
Yeah, you know what, you're right. It's definitely more people agree that in-person learning would be the best model. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think what the students understand because we have community meetings with them all the time, and they have friends who come to school in the Student Resource Center, and so they talk to their friends. Mm-hmm. Is what students see that maybe their caregivers don't see is that coming to school now is nothing like it was March 10th, last March 10th. Right. Wearing a mask. It's probably still getting some of your classes on Zoom because some of the teachers wouldn't be able to come back yet. Mm-hmm. It's adjusting to having to stay in pods in classrooms, not moving around the halls, not hanging around with your friends, not, the beautiful Great River camaraderie that you see with the students, lounging in between classes or going into indie workspaces or intermingling. It would be a very controlled experience that I don't think would necessarily satisfy this need for community and relationships.
Is there still room in the adolescent SRC for students who, on the last slide, who, for instance, free and reduced families, who, if the parents really feel like the students need to be in person, is there still room in the SRC adolescent for them?
Yes, there's plenty of room, and more adults are coming to work on site
Okay.
who are available, folks from the social work team, interventionists, on-site supervisors, uh, education assistants. More and more people are coming on site who can support the students there. Even so, I'll report that Matt McElrath, our Dean of Students, looked at all of the February semester grades, went through every single adolescent student, and contacted any student whose grades dipped or they don't look like they are succeeding in some of their classes, and invited them to come to the SRC.
Oh, good.
And many, in fact, most of the students said, I don't want to because it's just not like real, it's not like my school. It's not the way that I experience Great River School. I want to come back when it's the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, the students, I think, are a little more plugged into what they want and what they wouldn't be getting.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad they know the difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're spending a fair amount of time telling them,
Yeah.
and they talk to their friends who come to
Right.
the site. Yeah. So just different ways of looking at the same information. We've already kind of looked at this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the third set of data. Our employee answers. Distance learning is the best model for me right now. 60% of our employees, our adolescent staff and faculty say that distance learning is best. And I've talked to a lot of them, and what their fear is, concern is that they're at the home stretch of the academic year, and finally, like, these systems and processes for distance learning are functioning pretty well, and the students are, for the most part, doing pretty well. And it would take, all of them are, if we had to take 3 to 5 days of planning to get ready for in-person learning, they worry that we wouldn't have enough learning days, and the students, just don't have space and time to miss any instruction time and learning time. And it might even eat into what we're excited about, which is getting these spring intensives and the seniors being able to do their in-person activities once they finish IB exams, and the action projects for the lower adolescent students that we're trying to maximize in person. And so all the things that we're planning for the end of the year, where students are going to be able to be together in person, could be hindered with the change in model. So, and I'm just expressing, I'm not announcing a decision. I'm expressing what I'm hearing from teachers.
And the last time we talked about the staff answering questions, there was a fairly low turnout. Does this more adequately represent a larger number of?
Yes, we've knocked on their doors. Fill out your survey.
So really, then 77% agree with distance learning. If you add the.
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry. You're absolutely right. Thank you, Holly.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, what you said was accurate too.
No, but completely agree is even more agreeing than just agree.
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah. So that says something.
Mm-hmm. And again, here's the flipped question.
Mm-hmm.
So, and do we have any questions that have come in?
We do not, other than the ones on the slideshow.
Okay. And I already said most of this about what in-person learning actually looks like in pandemic times.
Mm-hmm.
So I did want to share a little bit of an update on things that are in the planning process for getting together in person. Upper adolescents are having some community meetings at Como Park with a Zoom component. And I just talked to Melanie, who's the upper adolescent director, a little while ago. And she shared with me that out of her whole staff, only 2 folks didn't think they could make these in-person meetings. So the students who get to come will also get to see their trusted adults, which is pretty
That's
exciting.
nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. And everyone feels good about it because it's outside
Mhm,
and they feel safe and comfortable in that setting.
mhm.
So there are sports happening, there are activities happening, there are community building activities happening on various dates. Grade 12 on April 21st, grade 11 on May 5th, and grade 10 on May 12th. There's a running club that's announced in the family bulletin. Students are actively planning some experiences, that student planned and student, that students can do together. Lots of guides are planning to announce in-person opportunities. I know that Sheila, the physics teacher, had offered a couple of in-person classes in the fall and would like to do the same in the spring. My goal is at the very least to have any adult who isn't at risk in our faculty community to at least at 1 or 2 times over the spring to offer an in-person experience to students. And for students, especially as we head into after spring break, to every student, I'm asking the adolescent folks to plan that every student could have at least one opportunity to have an in-person, whether it's a community gathering, whether it's a advisory, whether it's a a singing activity, whatever it is. I want that for our students. And one of the reasons that I'm really emphasizing that is that not only the students, but also a lot of the adults have anxiety around returning to groups of people. Like we found that that we worked with our social workers quite a bit around bringing elementary students back and mitigating their anxiety and the big change. And we found that it was the adults who had developed, like the day before everything opened back up, the last day of the planning week, the anxiety level was just intense. And then by the second day of the students being back, whew, everybody had completely calmed down. But I don't want, unless there are, other circumstances that make this need to happen, I really hope that our adults get some opportunities this spring to engage with students in person so that they don't have their first time in a year and a half coming back to work in August.
Yeah.
I think that's a harder entry than having some positive experiences.
I think it's important for everyone.
I agree. Yes. So we're also actively planning the week and a half in May where seniors get to do their experiential activities. And that's going to have in-person and virtual options. And the same is true for spring intensives. And then for lower adolescent, there are community gatherings that have already happened. There's one planned for tomorrow. Wear your Stop Raining pajamas tonight. And then more will be announced coming up soon. And similar to the upper adolescent, guides are invited to offer more in-person learning activities. And the action projects for grade 7, 8 begin on May 11th. And that will have a large in-person component to it.
And that answered one of the questions that came up. What about lower adolescent activities?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what I am ready to announce is that I'm ready to announce an announcement. on Monday, we are preparing communication to go out to adolescent families to more formally share what our learning model is going to look like throughout the spring. And so that is something you should be looking for and then responding to.
I did get a couple of comments from Tammy about the lower adolescent activities. The events are already on the calendar on the website.
Great.
So families can already go there to see them. So it's greatriverschool.org/calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also says, but the action project probably won't be a large in-person component. So that is something we need to make sure that people don't look for. It's not going to be a large in-person activity.
Mm-hmm. Well, those aren't large. I mean, Tammy can, again, lower adolescent 7-8 families should stay tuned for information from the level about what that looks like.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. And then I see a couple of questions, unless there are more that you have, Holly.
No, I don't have any right now.
Okay. Let's see. Has the new interim head of school been chosen, and when do they start? So the new interim head of school has not been chosen. They have the 2 finalists, and I believe the board meets at the end of the month. And I would anticipate that a formal announcement will go out the first week of April. And then the person begins their work on July 1st, which is the traditional kind of changing of the guard when things like that happen.
Okay.
And I see, if I didn't order a yearbook for last year, may I still buy one? Do you know the answer to that question, Holly?
Well, I know that last year's yearbooks just came in today.
I saw
rush in the office. You can pick up, if you ordered a yearbook from last year, you can pick it up between 9 and 3, Monday to Friday. And what was the question? Can I buy one if I didn't order one?
Mm-hmm.
Stacy is going to go through and count how many extras we have to see if she'll need to order more. But at this moment, yes.
Great. And if you can't get to school to pick your yearbook up, if you email office@, we will happily mail it to you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think we answered all the questions that we have.
Good.
Yeah.
Look at us go.
With 10 minutes to spare, if anyone has any more questions.
And this is the part where Sam likes to say, you can either raise your hand with the hand raising icon at the bottom of the screen, or even better, you could say you want to talk out loud and we could turn you into an out loud talker.
Awesome. All right, let's see if any hands go up.
So 2 weeks from now is spring break.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything happening at school before then? I know that the lower adolescent is having a community meeting together outside tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Grade 9 is.
Grade 9, thank you. Do we have any other events before spring break that we should review?
I don't recall if these, let me look back at that.
I think the upper adolescent is after spring break.
Okay. Yes, we do have an elementary, upper elementary classroom meeting outside meetup tomorrow.
Okay.
Or I think just one of the classrooms. I think just Crow Wing, I want to say. But you should have, if you're in one of these classrooms, you should have received, an invitation. And then Tammy just put something in the chat.
She did. Tree pruning details will come out tonight.
Exciting.
We're going to be cutting off all the trees. No, not.
Oh, we're going to give them a little haircut.
Little haircuts. And this is for all adolescents, grades 7 through 12th years.
Mm-hmm.
In the rain, that'll be perfect. Or is the tree pruning not tomorrow? Just the details tonight.
Right. I think that the gardening activities that are potentially upcoming are mostly Wednesdays, but again, Tammy can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. And I know that later in the spring we'll plant for the gardens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And maybe the goats will be back in the fall or this spring.
Right.
Who knows?
The fall, I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that they're going to come back to an much improved habitat.
Excellent. What has changed?
I think that Brent and Todd have been working to just improve their digs a little bit, make them
Oh,
certainly not, fancy pants, but cleaned up and tidier. And
no palaces.
no, no Taj Mahal for the goats.
Well, I don't see any more questions or chats.
Okay, well, then I will call it an evening.
Sounds good.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Tammy for your input, and Holly, thank you for your partnership.
You bet. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.